this episode of Carlie's Couch, in this episode of Carlie's Couch, we discuss anger and how to stop being so angry.
Grr. That's how you said anger. But that is kind of how anger feels. Hey, y'all. How y'all doing today?
That's not how it feels to me.
It can. It may be like a low growl. Hey, yeah. How does anger feel to you since we're starting here?
To me, anger feels like heat. And it feels like a hole in your chest, kind of too. Like the kind of anger I'm talking about, where you're like really in your soul angry, or like, you know, really like chronically angry over something, where like things trigger it, or like that's kind of just how you see the world through that lens after a while. I feel like that just feels like it's eating at you, literally. I think. Yeah,
like a seething. That's like that deep seated, like eating at you is a great way, I think, to put that for like the type of anger that's always there, or kind of like below the surface. It sounds like. I was thinking like acute anger, when it's like a flash, like a frustration or a growl. To me, that's how like acute anger feels.
Yeah, I don't even know what acute anger is, because like if I'm I just wouldn't call it that, but like if I'm angry, I'm like, I am really angry. Anything else, I'm not sure. But like there's definitely levels. I'm not saying like it's only one or nothing, but trying to think of an example of what a quick thing would be, and I don't think I would call that anger for me, unless it's like really, like I really do feel like upset.
Yeah, the last one I can think about was I got into it with one of my classmates. And it wasn't even, that probably wasn't even anger. I wouldn't even say that either. But he had me messed up. Like, he came at me sideways, and that was the last.
Like situational anger.
Yeah, it's like situational. Like, that thing happened. Then I let that shit go afterwards. But yeah,
situational anger for sure. Like, I think it's only like one of my friends that I've gotten really like upset with, and that's because like they completely like embarrassed me on a client call, and I called them, and I was like, don't you ever embarrass me like that. Like, I was like mad, I was angry, like I just like exploded on them, and I was like, I've never, at that point I was like, I've never even done that to no guy or anything like that before, like in a relationship and things like that. So like that's how I knew I was angry. I've had a work partner call me one time, and like all of a sudden I just started screaming, like my voice was like shaking. So for me, if I'm expressing, and if I'm really feeling angry in like a situational type of context, and I'm expressing that, like it really just comes out as like uncontrolled, very loud and abrasive, I would say. But for me, chronic anger is a little bit different, because it almost becomes like a lifestyle. So like I'm not walking around per se like yelling like that, but I might be, I am probably walking around being slightly on edge, or like a little irritable, maybe more irritable than the next person. You know what I mean? Like we all have seen and know people in pop culture, in real life, where it's like you might be like, hey, you having a good day? And they're like, why would I be having a good day? Or like, why are you so chipper? Or like, you know, like those type of people. Sometimes when you're like that it's almost like you're living in an angry place. So that's really kind of what I wanted to have us talk about today, because recently I realized like that I was still holding on to some anger that I didn't think I was. Like, you know, for the most part, I feel like I'm pretty nonchalant, or, you know, chilling, and that I was not affected by a particular situation. And then as soon as I was talking to this person, I was in their face the other day, and like everything just made me like, I was just irritable. Like, I didn't yell at them or scream at them, but you know how it is when you start like pulling up old stuff, or like your brain just like transforms into like Ash Ketchum when he turned his hat around. My brain was like, time to get petty, and like everything. I was like, all right. And afterwards, I felt come back. I was like, dang, like, because they weren't trying to do that, I don't think. And they're like, okay, you know, just talking to me like, okay, I'm, you know, whatever, I understand. But like it all just came from me, is what I'm trying to say. So I was like, damn, I felt kind of bad, but also I was like, no, but I should be angry. But like, also like, how do you get rid of that? Because I didn't want to be angry. That wasn't my intent. I was, I thought I was just going to be catching up or whatever, but I just got filled with anger. So yeah, that's why I want to talk about that. Like different situations where, you could just have that anger has just grown inside of you. What's another kind of space where people can identify with that kind of anger?
It can be trauma induced. I think a lot of times like chronic, like that underlying anger that can cause you to lash out, or the one you said that just kind of like eats at the surface, but it's always there, but puts you a little on edge, makes you more irritable. And you kind of start to define yourself by that, like, oh, she be going off on folks, or, whatever. I think that situations that cause trauma have done that, but also thinking about structural systems. So like racism, poverty, like things like that can also put you in situations where you have this probably rage in the moment, or things about the system that you probably feel like you can't change, or you just see how it affects you and your loved ones and start to kind of carry that around. It's almost like a chip on your shoulder a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that always makes things layered when, like, we live in America where maybe something happens that's a display of, inappropriate police force or racism or whatever. And then everybody kind of collectively, like, you're angry in that moment, but also imagine, like, how that builds and builds and builds to where, yes, when you're walking around, you do feel some kind of way if you see police, or you expect or might see through a lens of, I'm not respected or whatever. Things that it's like, it's true, but also how unfortunate that we have to be so angry about it all the time, right? Like, but that's also what's real. So in these kind of spaces, it's like, how do you change it? Or should you even? I think that's maybe one of the first things I would say, like, is there anything wrong with being angry? And especially in those cases of a situation where somebody really hurt you, or systems really got you messed up, or your water you can't drink in your city, and like, whatever's going on, right? Things that might give you a right to be angry, but should you be? Or is it always like a move on, let it go, forgive it?
No, and as a move on, let it go, forgive type of person, like, anger is very healthy. It's a healthy emotion, and it's necessary. I don't think great change has ever been made without that spark of anger. And so I think it's important, especially when thinking about structural things or even toxic relationships or situations, to better your life and better the lives around you. It's necessary. I think the issue is it's a perceived negative emotion. And usually we get in trouble when we have angry outbursts because we're never taught how to deal with anger. So I think that's the issue, is anger is not bad. It's we don't really know how to deal with it.
So then I would say feeling angry isn't bad. But then what about being angry the next week about it, or the next month, or whatever? Like, at what point do you still need to do something or figure out something?
We're human. And so I think, like, if I say, man, I'm gonna give you 3 days to process structural racism, and then you can't be mad no more, doc. Okay, that's crazy, because it's still happening and it's ongoing. So it'd be unrealistic to put a timeline on our emotions. Plus, we're all different. Like, different things affect us in different ways, and you might have seen more that makes you more angry, and being in different situations. And so I think however long it takes you to process is okay. I think the issue, like, when it becomes a problem, is whenever it does start to eat away at you. Like, there's a quote from the Buddha, is like, being angry is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to get hurt from it. And so it's like, anytime you hold on to those things that start to tear you apart, like, that's when it becomes problematic.
Yeah, I think it is healthy to be angry against particular systems, and, people being hurt or held back or not treated fairly, etc. And I'm always so conflicted, though. Like, I even yesterday, listening to School of Greatness, Eric Thomas was on there, and I was like, oh, Eric Thomas always, he gonna inspire you. But also, I started to kind of feel some kind of way, because when people do say things like, you live in America. Like, yes, things are messed up, but you do live in America. Like, you can still do things, take advantage of it, move through it, all of that. And it's like, yeah, you can, but also, like, do you have to put in the context of also, yes, it's been made hard and whatever. And, I don't know. It's hard for me to find that line between how things are and how you should be able to move, if they were different, or how things should be. And so I think it's a very thin line. Like, we're going to be angry in a place like this. Like, you have to be angry to a point, I think. But you can manage it. You can, in the case of something like racism and all of those things you were talking about, you can, I don't know. I don't even think that means you have to help anything or do anything, but like you have to manage it in order to like move through life, because what happens is like there's still this perpetual like wall you're kind of putting yourself up against to where you kind of can't do more. And it's, I don't know, I think it's just unfortunate that anger holds you back even if you have a right to be angry.
Exactly. And that's the hard part, right? Is like, if you keep that stress and that anger and that heaviness in your body and are always like, and like reacting in certain ways and lashing out on people, like that really hurts you. Like, yes, you're justified in your anger for whatever situation. You know what I mean? You don't have to explain your emotions, but it's like, how are they affecting you? And I like your point. You don't even have to help nobody else or try to change nothing. But you know, if it's disempowering you and keeping you from being your best self or hurting your family and your friends, like if you're always lashing out, you know what I mean, and doing stuff to them, like it's definitely something that needs to be addressed. But how do we get there, right? So we have a right to be angry, but now we're carrying around all this poison and this anger inside. Is like.
But you mentioned something that I think can take into another different direction and think about as well is why that chronic anger is so bad, because it does disempower you. I think that word is very important. It also can paralyze you. So not thinking about, you know, the world or what other people are doing against you. A lot of times chronically angry people, if you're angry, regardless of what it's coming from, right, wherever it's coming from is probably valid. But a lot of times when you're chronically angry, that's really kind of like you having your guard up, being extra protective, and you're not asking yourself like the tough questions, or you're not facing certain things. And so being angry is kind of a distraction instead of really looking at a particular situation or what's going on with you and your situation, et cetera, et cetera. So it disempowers you in that in being angry, you're never looking at yourself and progressing in any way, because it's all like outside of you. And then paralyzing you because, like, again, you're not really looking at things and you're reacting and you're not progressing forward, because you're not like, okay, this person did this, like I'm really angry about this, and not making any change or move of like what else is going to be different, or what are you going to change, even if that's like, okay, so let me block their number, or just doing something different or trying to move forward.
Yeah, and very like on a very physical level, being angry puts you in fight or flight, because most of the time, like, it's such a visceral reaction is to protect you. But what happens when your body stays in that is you start to get sick. Like it affects your sleep. It affects like your clarity of thought. Like you have cloudy vision essentially, and like how you're moving forward in your work. So it literally starts to mess up everything else, which sucks because a lot of times we're not the own catalyst of our anger, but it's like you need to process it so that it doesn't start to have this ripple effect out into the rest of your life.
And in those times when you are like chronically angry, not in outburst mode, but even if you're just by yourself and you're ruminating,
tense
or
jaw.
you know how you just be mad. Like I know I've had like whole combos in my head before, like, oh, they say this, I'm gonna say this, and it's like you're making the whole thing up, making yourself mad over what you think they might say, or even if you were right, it's just like, why are you're in such a space of like being controlled by something. And it does. That's why I described it the way I did at the beginning, because that flight and fight and that adrenaline is what like that feels like when it's like tight and all in your body. And yeah, I noticed that even in times of maybe anger or just high stress, anxiety is similar to where you do feel drained and you feel like you're tired, but it's because you are doing too much in your body and your mind probably. You're doing too much. So like, yes, you're low performing. And that's what we're saying by like kind of making yourself in a cycle of like, you don't really get out into a more productive space when you are kind of stuck in being drained over anger.
And so I like the references to the body, because I think that's the first thing that usually happens when I know I'm angry. Like you said, tightness of chest. I might have a little Arthur fist, like be clenching my hands or my jaw, a little furrow in my brow, or like looking at somebody crazy, because I do it's hard for me to catch my facial expressions. I'm really good about pausing before I say things, but my face sometimes be real messed up when somebody said like, huh? So just looking at how it manifests in your own body is like the first line of defense. And then also thinking about, how on edge you do feel. I think that for the chronic anger or like the signs that you might be holding on to stuff that's a little bit deeper, it's like, are you all good? And then, in traffic, somebody cut you off and then you fly off the handle at them. Like, that could be unreleased anger. Or, somebody bumps into you and now you're trying to brawl on the street. Like, what's going on?
Yeah, it's always easier, as usual, to see to other people when you, like, say something to them and they kind of go off. But for sure, I would say, like, some signs that it might be underlying anger. A lot of these emotions, though, I think are very interconnected, but it might kind of be stemming from anger if you are so easily irritated, if you're like hostile, and or if you can tell your reactions or behavior is just a little bit more than it needs to be. Like maybe even if somebody does joke or something, but you like, you take it way over here and it's like, whoa, that wasn't necessarily warranted because of, like you were saying, you have all this other built up stuff that's going on. So if you're a ticking time bomb, I think you would know it. If not, think about those things.
Yeah, I was about to say, actually, I'm not sure if people do. Hopefully they do, but I'm thinking one reason I knew before I started going to therapy back in college, when I would drink, I would get real spicy. Like, I'm real about that life for no reason sometimes. It's like, yo, calm down, see, like, what's wrong? And so also noticing how you are whenever you're uninhibited a little bit. So if you do start to drink and you always rowdy, you know what I'm saying, there might be some unaddressed anger there. I know I definitely had some. I wasn't always trying to fight, but I was way more aggressive.
Yeah, that's a good point, too, because I was reading something about chronic anger where they say, like, if you're that person who, like, you go to the bar, but, like, you kind of hoping, like...
You hope?
I used to go out, too, in college, like, I hope that one girl, like, rubbed me the wrong way so I could just be like, what? And just go crazy. And for sure, like, and I used to always be like, yeah, I have aggression issues, like, when I played rugby and stuff, and, like, this is why I would want an outlet. But now I'm thinking about it, and I was like, oh, I never... Even though I've always said, like, oh, yeah, I can be an aggressive person, but, like, I never thought about it as, like, oh, actually, you just probably have, like, underlying chronic anger. I just lost my train of thought. There was something else that you made me think about with that, and, like, how when you go around places, like, you may be kind of looking for that outlet for aggression. If I remember it, I'll come back to it. But I think that's a good point, too, for being able to pinpoint. Oh, what I was going to say is that, and now also looking at it and thinking about it, which we haven't really brought up yet, is that a lot of times, too, because you might be like, I'm not angry. Like, I'm not angry at nobody, like, whatever. A lot of the time, probably most of the time, is anger with yourself. Or anger that is stemming from maybe you not being okay with something that you did, or again, kind of tying to maybe some shame, or like, dang, like, I don't know if my parents, this or that. Like, a lot of times it can be anger with yourself, or like, oh, I didn't do so well with, I'm not doing well at work. And so maybe you're more irritable, everything has you on edge or whatever, and you're angry, but that anger might be stemming towards yourself. So it's something else to consider and think about when you're trying to pinpoint what's going on.
And so in that same vein, there are a couple ways that anger is typically expressed. So outward is really easy to see. Easier is for yourself and for other people. If you're expressing your anger, like very, like yelling at people, flying off the handle, maybe fighting all the time, or just being real snippy and sharp with people for no reason, like that is easy to see. But I like that Lexi brought up inward, because that's a little harder to notice because it's inside of your head. It's directed at yourself. It could be negative self-talk or denying yourself things that make you happy. Your basic needs such as food, probably on a other scale, but even self-harm, and isolating yourself from people. Like if you have any of those tendencies, that could be your way of trying to process these angry emotions or other emotions that you have going on.
Yeah, and I think the way you express it doesn't necessarily mean if you're angry with you or with other people. But sometimes people are more they are more of a isolating person from situations, and perhaps to your point, if you do practice more of like inward expression, that you may be trying to punish yourself, or like you're thinking like you're not a good person, or you have to deny something for yourself. So actually, I'll take that back. That probably is a good sign that it might be with you, that you do have the issue. Another way that we often see people express anger is passively. And that's when you're like real subtle with it, you're indirect. Maybe I put the bathroom cleaner and a sponge on the sink instead of being like, so you just gonna leave the whole thing messy. You kind of are expecting people to know that you're angry and like read your mind, and they should know to do this or that. And you're kind of sulking. And I think the passive anger, which I express that a lot actually, that's probably, I would say, like, can be the most hurtful toward yourself as well, because it's really mental as well. And that's just like, you're just a salty person, and it sucks to be in that space. And it's really hard, I think, to get out of.
Yeah. And I think it's one of the most difficult ones to deal with, because it's like, bro, let's just talk. Let's just talk about what's going on, instead of like, we ain't got to do all this back and forth. But thinking about how you do express anger, you know, if you're arguing with your partner, or if you feel a type of way with your, you know, coworker at work, if you know, doing little slick stuff to them too, and looking at how you express your anger is important. Mm-hmm. But it's like, okay, so we know how we express anger. We've seen different ways we can do that. Like, how do you know, like, what you're angry about? You mentioned a little bit, you could be mad at yourself. It could be someone else. It's like, how do we find the source of your anger? Like, do you even know what it is?
I would say, so the first thing is, if you can think about what the signs are in your body and how you react, if you can catch it. So the next time, if you catch yourself being a little more irritable with somebody, or something that might be less obvious and like they made you angry right there. But then think about like, oh, why am I a little, attitudinal right now? Like, what's kind of going on? Well, I ain't like the way she was talking to me. And then you can kind of narrow that down, I think, to like, what are you so afraid of? Like, not being seen or heard. I was having a conversation with, I ain't gonna call him a friend, but somebody today, and they were talking about how like, yeah, like, I'm realizing I'm super angry, but it's because of my mom. And apparently, like, their mom had like been abusive to them, like super, like, never listened to them, always trying to tell them like what they need to be doing, all those things, right? But like super off. But because of that, they live life through a lens of like, nobody listens to me. Like, why don't you listen to me? So if I were to be like, if they're like, I want a double cheeseburger, and I say, okay, you know, that has like two meats and 2 cheeses, then they like, even just saying something like seems like questioning them. They're like, nobody ever listened to me. Like, I said I want a double cheeseburger. I know what a double cheeseburger is. I want the double cheeseburger. And it's like, whoa, like, it wasn't that deep, but knowing that about them and like why, like, I know they had that whole lens behind it that kind of fuels the way they think and see things. It's like, oh, I know what things are going to be more sensitive. And I think that's super interesting. And I think that we can sometimes do that with ourselves around like, what is it that we're feeling, like what's feeling threatened right now, and what possibly could have brought that up, like what leads to that. And I think a lot of times it is like feeling unseen, unheard. Even if you want to talk about racism, how people act and all kind of other things, it's like you feel disrespected or you feel kind of threatened by other people. And so I think that identifying that at least gives you a starting point of knowing like where that might come from.
And it's so important because emotions are just signals, right, about what we're going on and how we're really deeply feeling. So even in the Gottman Institute, they're talking about in relationships, a lot of times people's arguments are not because they didn't take out the trash, it's because they feel like their partner doesn't support them. So they feel unsupported or unseen or unappreciated.
And you have a desire, like, I want to feel appreciated. I want to feel seen. I want to feel desired. And so when you can pause to reflect on that anger, that's when you can identify like what it is you're actually wanting. But you're like a kid and you're like, yeah, over here. But like what you're really wanting is this. And what is a different, more effective way to get that, which is hard when you're not feeling those things. And it's easy to like start nagging somebody or whatever. But like that only drifts people away. And so it's like, how can you better communicate what you actually want?
You got to figure it out first. So I would say take some time with yourself. Like, shout out to that person for even knowing that's kind of where his anger comes from. Like, that's a big step.
Yeah, child, because I've been doing, I be telling people, but you know, you can tell people, you're like, damn, I can see this now. Or like, maybe I think because of my own journey too with therapy, it's like everything so truly goes back to your parents. It's so crazy. And so now it's like, even I have another friend, I asked him, I was like, did your mom criticize you a lot? He's like, I don't think so. I'm like, I think they do, because But I asked that because I'm like, this guy's always has something smart to say all the time, as if like nothing's ever good enough. Like, oh, I see you got a little spot on your shirt or something. Like, you always got to call something out. And that makes me think, like, maybe you had a critical parent who was always like, do this, do that, make sure that's together. And a lot of times, like, you can learn a lot about people by kind of understanding, like, what are those things that they were always trying to, like, break through with their parents. So, yeah, I think all that is fascinating.
And it's so funny. As much as a lot of times, like, for me, I was like, I don't want to say that, you know, everything was because of my parents, but the more I'm in therapy, I'm like, oh damn, most of this stuff was actually because of those things that happened when we were young, because that's when our brain starts to form, so it makes sense.
Or it's like it goes back to, that's how you learn to deal with things because of that. Like, it might not be one thing happened so you're like this, but like, yes, I learned to deal with things a certain way, or I learned to move like this or that because I was trying to be close to you, or, you know, have love, or whatever it was, which is natural from your parents. So
it's like, once you know that you might have an anger issue, a chronic anger issue, which I would argue that I think probably a lot of people have, in different ways, from different things, different traumas, etc. How do you stop? How do you get okay with this anger issue? Like, what are some things we can do to, you know, start to heal it?
And in my particular instance, I'm sure now that I'm thinking about it, there are probably deeper angers, like with myself or with family or people, that's like longer rooted. But the thing like that's more recent, that is clearly like triggering and stuff, and that I can identify. I feel like with time and with the practice of things like kind of being aware of the trigger, sometimes you do just need to avoid that person, or avoid certain situations where you know that might come up. I know you shouldn't like live your life like trying to avoid everything, but there's some obvious things where it's like, all right, now you need to stop calling that girl. Like, every time you call the girl, you get in an argument, this and that happening. Like, you need to just stop. A few other things, but and you can give us a few too. But I think like sometimes you have to do those practices until with time, like, you do kind of just move on. Like, when you think about any, especially like past relationships, things like that, past conflicts, it's like, all right, you don't even care about that anymore. So with certain things, I think that time and practice of separating yourself are good.
For sure. Another one, y'all aren't going to be surprised by this answer, is to have a consistent self-care routine. If you're taking care of yourself physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, it really helps put you in the best space to face anything that's going on in your life, including those underlying anger issues. And adding on to that, you have to have a healthy outlet for release. Exercise. I've seen people scream into pillows, boxing, martial arts, but it might like breaking things, but it might not even be nothing crazy, like physical things like that. Like, maybe it is a meditation. You know what I mean? Maybe that's the thing that gets you to relax, is a meditation, but it has to be consistent. It has to be something that you like make sure you put down on your schedule and don't miss, to keep yourself regulated.
Yeah, I think meditating is the hardest thing to do when you actually are feeling angry, because like it's hard to, you're already like thinking about that, so it's hard to like move away as much. But for sure, putting your energy into stuff. I think the other day I wasn't angry. I was just kind of feeling kind of down, but like, you know, it's just like, okay, let me go outside, get some fresh air, or I'll try to like maybe read. So it's like, if your brain is like reading words, although I just kept reading the same paragraph, so I was like, this ain't it. Another thing too, like with that same conversation, where the guy was talking about his mom, one thing that I told, I was like, you know what, I could tell, I feel like one thing you could do is that during times of when you're feeling angry, so like for example with parents, because I do this with my parents too, you know, sometimes like as soon as, you probably do too, I think you mentioned this, as soon as you like they call, or like you're in front of them, like you do kind of, your whole body like here we go again, like you do kind of get tight already, because you already know, even though it's like, dang, like I can't, and that happened in relationships, in all kind of relationships also, actually, now that I think about it, like, but that's like what we're talking about. It's like you already tight, and you go in there and you're like, I'm waiting for you to say something, you know what I mean? That's like, I know you're gonna blow me, like, and but how bad is that to like already be feeling that when it hasn't even happened? And at the same time, I before in relationships, I know I have tried to be like, all right, I'm just gonna go in here fresh, and then they probably gonna blow you anyway. But like, it just feels better to like try to be fresh. But in the worst situations, like it's still gonna, like the other day, like for me, like man, we just chilling, but I'm still like just getting mad. So anyway, all that to say, like, so I was like, man, I bet you like get kind of tight when you're like in front of your mom off top. And it's like, yes, 'cause I know she's gonna say something crazy. And it's like in those moments, I imagine that we probably are reverting back to like ourself as a kid. And I was like, think about, because they were also talking about wanting kids and stuff. And I was like, now, you sound like you're trying to fill a void with something, like, or trying to do a better job, or you want something to take care of. And I was like, what if you took care of like your inner child? Like in that moment, like you probably, in those moments, you feel the most like, ugh, I want to be away from you. I want to have my family. I want to settle down or do whatever else, is probably showing that you need to give attention to that inner child. And like, whatever that looks like, whether it's play, like Carlie talks about often, or your self-care, or you're running around or exercise or whatever, I think that's a lot of times what it is. Like you really got to go back into that space as a kid in that time that you're really acting as, and then like how do you do something a little different? So that's something I start to think about a little more too, is like, who am I acting like right now? And like, let me hop back in a 37-year-old Lex, and like with everything I know, how would I approach this or act or let it affect me?
We have such an opportunity, such a beautiful opportunity. We need to do a whole episode on inner child, probably with a therapist, but on healing and stuff like that, because we do definitely revert back to that. That's our younger brain. That's like the prehistoric brain, is the fight or flight or freeze. And so anytime you're in that, in fact, your body is biologically in that. And so another thing that we didn't mention is like just changing your environment. So not just avoiding the people or situations, but like with my mom in our healing process, I had to put up some boundaries because she wasn't respecting them. And that's what like I needed for myself. And it hurt her feelings. And I was like, look, dog, it is what it is. I love you, but I got to love me more right now. And we're cool. But it's like, you do have to change your environment until you can heal enough to have that conversation, or until people actually respect your boundaries. If you still want them to be in your life or whatever's going on. Especially with family. I think family is probably some of the hardest things because they've been around for so long. So it's so hardwired in our DNA to like, ugh. But taking that pause and also trying to stay curious. So every time my body tenses up, like when my mom calls or when my stepdad or whoever in my family, I'm like, okay, I do what you do. I'm like, all right, let me just be curious. How you doing today? How you doing today?
It's hard too.
But I be trying. And the more you try, think about it as like, we've had 30 plus years of reacting a certain way. It's going to take some time to undo all of these things, dealing with anger, dealing with things in relationships, getting triggered, etc.
And it is different too when it's like, they might not be necessarily doing that work either. So there's sometimes when it's like, all right, like I might know that they're working on things or we've had discussion or whatever. But then there's sometimes where like, maybe in this case, and your mom probably has grown and changed in different ways over the years, but like maybe it's like one-sided where it is like, I'm going in this curious. They might not have had no work, not doing nothing, whatever. So like, that's why you still get blown. But yeah, it's different when it's just you too. It's like even harder.
Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, it doesn't get easier. There's not, I don't know. And that sounds like bleak, but I don't know. I'm still in the thick of it. I would like to hear
how. There's a few people who hit me up and I'd be like, oh, that's just, like, you just got so many times to like, if I don't know if you about to just be drinking too much and yelling at for no reason, or if this about to be, hey, how you doing? Like a regular call. And it's just like, I don't have time to deal with like that. And I need folks to figure themselves out sometime, but.
All the time.
It's neither here nor there.
Yeah.
When it comes to having to deal with other folks, and it's like we have enough issues on our own as well. So it's like I could tell when other people are being angry, and it's like you blowing me. So I don't know. One thing I would say too is like if you're chronically angry, maybe it's really, I don't know. I think you need to be really considerate about other people too, because now this is going something a little bit different. But I do have a person. I wouldn't even call them a friend either, but a person is like. They just be going off, and it don't never be about me for real. But it's just like, bro, come on, this is so old.
Yeah, and
all that
projecting.
Release.
Yeah, dude.
And they said with their therapist, they're like, yeah, I've been seeing this therapist for a long time, but like, okay, I get what the problem is. She's like, I think I'm sad and this and that. I'm like, cool, but like, so what are we about to do? Like stop calling me. She's like, yeah, I need some actual things to do and figure out. And I'm like, yeah, you need something. But yeah, talk to a therapist,
please.
Talk to somebody in support. There's anger management. Y'all seen Jack Nicholson? That's the most annoying movie ever. Oh my God. Why was he like that? Like,
good God.
I love how in that movie they make you angry watching it. It's so good.
Oh, live it.
But for sure, get some professional help if you need to.
Yeah, please. And upkeep and take care of yourself and notice how you are projecting on other people. You know, because people will only stick around for so much of that. And if you really care for them, you know, work on yourself. So we've done all these things. We got aware of our triggers. We know what's, you know, hurting us or making us upset and how we deal with it. Have our self-care routine and our, you know, healthy outlet. We're doing all the things. We changed our environment, talking to a therapist. How do you know that you're actually healed? Like, how can you tell when you're past something or through it, beyond it?
I don't think I've ever gotten past anything that was a chronic anger in my life. And even right now, like before you were going through that list, I was thinking like, I don't know. Like, you could do all those things and it's still, it's still, you're still angry. And I think another huge thing is that it has to be filled with something else. And so I think that is where like the self-care part, and maybe you can figure out what formula you need based on what's going on with you. Maybe for me, because I'm really trying to think like what would actually really change this. I think it might be more around doing more things for myself or something. I don't know. There's something to fill there. But I imagine that, sure, with time, like, you'll be triggered less. And again, that comes from like, oh, you're actually living life, you're enjoying yourself, you're enjoying things, you're moving forward, time, etc. And, you know, certain things might not bother you as much anymore from the past. Or you might not be as angry. So I don't know if you're ever completely like trigger free on a particular like chronic anger. But it could definitely lessen. Things definitely don't affect you like they may have before. But I think in a lot of cases, it just transfers. So let's say this was like an ex and you were super angry and something happened. And half the time, like, okay, yes, now it's like, man, I done, my last 5 boyfriends did this. And like, you really, like, it's so hard to like not expect that, not think you're seeing that, not, you know, to not bring that along. It is hard. And yeah, that's what this whole episode is about. I don't really know what to tell you. And I think it's a constant practice. So I don't know. I kind of hesitate to be like, you know, you are healed from the anger because that's there. It's just figuring out like, how do you separate that from me? And how do you separate what happened from like who I am and what I'm worth and, you know, what I have going on and all of those things. I think that's the biggest thing is we keep things too close and it's too personal. And a lot of times you got to like really just practice separating it. So that's kind of something that I would probably try to catch, or just calling yourself out too. I've called myself out since I was all mad the other day and was like, all right, now I could tell I'm just like saying stuff like just be petty right now. My bad. Like I'm just talking shit. I'm like, oh, that was big of you. I'm like, I mean, it's still stuff that's true, but like I could tell I'm just like my brain is starting to spiral off on like and this and this and this. So like catch yourself, call yourself out. And maybe after a while you notice you're catching yourself less.
Yeah, I think that's a huge piece. And I like that you mentioned it might not ever go away. How
do you stop being angry about
I don't think it's ever
racism and things like that?
I don't think you should. You know, I don't think you should. I think you find healthy ways to process and handle that. But I do think that chronic anger hurting you and then also causing you to lash out and do those type of things, like you can get
being
past
a hurt
that.
Person who hurts people.
Exactly.
Yeah, so stopping it from like hurting yourself and hurting others.
Yeah, you can heal yourself. And I think the ways you notice are, you know, you start to get triggered less. And even when you do, your reaction time comes down. What you used to ruminate and be upset on and argue in your head for like weeks about now might take you 30 minutes.
I think about that video, that lady on the bus, like.
Yeah. It's like, you know, the things that used to really weigh you down or used to really struggle with, you notice that your bounce back time is like, oh, okay. Like I feel better. Like I am now able to separate this from my worth, because that's growth, you know, and realize
or even recognizing that you need to
is
a big deal.
And so on this healing journey, like that, I think that's the win. Like that's how you start to notice whenever you can actually feel emotions, you know, maybe that's success from.
Because yeah, like you're saying, like being all the way healed and all that is like,
I don't know if that ever happens. Yeah,
but that's the success to at least know what you're doing.
Yeah, name it, feel it, process it in healthy ways. And if you don't, you call yourself out and you circle back with your therapist or whomever and then get back on the path. Like, it kind of is what it is. But it's just being aware and being fully present with yourself and forgiving yourself. I think it also takes a lot of self-compassion because we are all human. We be messing up. So,
yeah, and I know a few angry people who I could tell, like, over time, it's like, oh, you're a little bit different. You've been acting much. Even the person I was talking about earlier who, like, be calling me and it's like, bro, are you about to walk me out? Are you going to be regular today? I don't know. But, like, even with that, it's like, hey, you're much better because it used to always be, anytime I hear from you, it's just on some BS. Like, so, yeah, give people grace, give yourself grace, and be curious and explore and try to understand and discover and process your feelings. It's been so cool to do that because I never did it much in most of my life. And as I do that more and more now, I'm like, oh, everything's so easy to navigate. As far as like, oh, this is kind of how I'm feeling. And then from there, it starts to kind of melt away, or it melts into clarity. That whatever the actual trigger part is or situation isn't as strong, or like doesn't really have as much a hold on you.
Yeah, that's really the beautiful part in the win, because then you're not carrying around all this heavy stuff and projecting on folks. And also, if you just ever want to not be angry again, or never feel jealous, or never feel upset or insecure, sorry, we're human, so inevitably that's going to happen. It's about finding healthier ways to deal with it.
All right, so let's find some healthier ways to deal with being angry. Let's address it. And we hope you got something out of that episode. Leave us a comment on YouTube, on the post, on Instagram, tweet us. Let us know what you think. And if you have any ideas or thoughts about anger, we are happy to hear them. We're going to end our show with a question of the week.
Question of the week is, Alexia, what is your earliest memory?
What is my earliest memory? I don't know, because it's very false when you just know like stories that people tell you and pictures that you've seen. One of the earliest memories I remember, I guess I would have had to at least been 4-ish. No, more than 4, probably 5 or 6, because both of my brothers were alive. I would say maybe something around, like kindergarten, first grade years. And hanging out with my brothers, like how we used to like dress up and put on shows and do things like that. But also I do remember a couple memories from like elementary school, from like kindergarten, of like eating paint. I remember being mad at this girl who told on me because I ate some paint and eating glue. But I don't think I remember much for real before like kindergarten.
Yeah, it's funny how most of our memories are false, even as adults. But I would say I stepped on a bee when I was like 3. We were like walking to the car and I was barefoot and I got stung. I stepped on and killed him and he shot my foot up. And I remember that being very painful and like screaming. And then I also remember my grandpa picking me up from pre-K. Like, he would have his little dog and I would like run out in the front yard. Like, those are my favorite things when my grandpa picked me up. And his big old white Lincoln with his little sun hat and his little pocket square and his dog and his suspenders. So I was like, those are like my favorite memories. The other one that I remember for sure was I beat up this girl, speaking of anger, heated, all that, because she fell asleep on my coat and it was nap time. And I wanted my coat because I had this really long coat. I really wanted it. And I told the teacher, I was like, yo, girl sleep on my coat. And the teacher was like, just let her sleep. And I'm like, no, we're about to nap. And I don't want this towel because it's scratchy. Like, I want my coat. And the teacher said, nah. So I woke her up and the girl didn't move. And I beat her up and we got into a fight. And so I got sent to the office. And I remember standing in the office. And the girl had, the lady who works in the office had a really big booty. Because I remember I was like sitting in this little chair. Right? And she was just like swinging that thing around. So I got in trouble. Got in big trouble for that. Sorry, Miss April. You should have gave me my coat.
Yeah, you got a few things you need to process. On that note, we're gonna close out for today. Thank you for joining us.
I'm
messing up at the very beginning and the end. Thanks for joining us on Carlie's couch.
Bye, y'all.
Peace.